Hey guys, welcome back. This is Bimzy Code. In today's lesson, we're going to be learning about prefabs. The main objective here is to create the items that are going to be falling from the sky in our game. And the best way to do that is with prefabs. So let's get started by right-clicking, going to 3D Object, and clicking Cube. So we've now got a cube in our game scene. Hierarchy over here, and rename this cube to Droppable, because this object's going to be dropping from the sky. After that's done, let's go into the right hand side here and give this one a tag. So we want to go here and add tag. Just hit plus over here and let's give a new tag, droppable. So all of our game objects that are going to be falling from the sky are going to have the same tag and they're going to inherit from the same prefab. Alright, let's go ahead and save. So let's go ahead and create a prefab out of this droppable game object. What we're going to want to do is just go into the prefabs folder over here and drag this droppable game object in. Now you can see that we've got our prefab for droppable. We can go ahead and delete this one in the scene. So I like to think of a prefab as a clone. All we need to do is drag this droppable prefab into our scene and we've created an instance of the droppable prefab. Now what's cool about prefabs is we can drag multiple droppable prefabs in and these highlight as blue when they appear in the scene. That's how you know they're a prefab. Now what we can do is go to this prefab here and if we start changing properties on the prefab, like the scale, all of the prefabs inside our scene will update automatically. So that's how they sort of clone out their properties. Another cool thing about prefabs is we can create a variant of these prefabs. So to demonstrate this, I'll quickly create a droppable small and a droppable large. So droppable small, let's give this guy an x coordinate of 1. And then we go to droppable large. Let's give this guy a z coordinate of 2. So we've got our small, medium, and large prefabs. Let's go ahead and create a prefab variant of this droppable small. So in this interface here, you can see we've got original prefab and prefab variant. It'll be easiest to demonstrate this in a second. So we'll just create a prefab variant out of our small, and we'll go ahead and create an original prefab out of our prefab large. So if we create a prefab variant, the big difference between an original prefab and a prefab variant is that the prefab variant will actually continue taking its properties from the original droppable prefab. So to demonstrate this, we'll make the height of this droppable prefab 2, make it a bit higher, and the prefab small should update with it, whereas the prefab large didn't, because this prefab large is now its own prefab, an original prefab, which means it's taken all ties from its original one and sort of gotten rid of them. So let's go ahead and set up the prefabs like we're going to need to use them in our game. So we can delete this guy, and let's get rid of all these. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a script for our droppable. So let's just go ahead in our scripts folder, create C# script. Call this one droppable, and let's go ahead and open that one up. We want to set up this droppable class as having behavior to be both an obstacle and a scoring mechanism for our player, because the player is going to be trying to collect some of the droppables and avoiding some of the others. So how we want to do this is by creating two variables. We're going to create a public boolean is droppable, or is obstacle rather, equals false, just as a default. And then we're going to also create a public integer score equals, let's set that default to maybe 5. So we can create different scores for different droppable types. So let's go ahead and make our score 0. So if is obstacle, so basically what we're saying here is if this droppable object is an obstacle, we're going to want to set our score to be equal to 0 because you don't want any points if you're an obstacle. And that's just by default in the start. Alright, that's looking pretty good in terms of what we're going to need in future videos. So let's go ahead and get back into the Unity scene. So as you'll see, if we go to our droppable object in the scene here, let's update some of these values. And drag this script onto the droppable game object. This droppable game object doesn't actually reflect the prefab that we have in the scene. So if we click this prefab, we don't have the script and we're still on this 2-to-1 scale. So what we're going to want to do to fix this is go into our game object, click overrides, and apply all. If we apply all, we're going to be making the changes to our local game object be the droppable prefab. If we hit revert all, we're going to lose all changes between this local game object and the droppable prefab. So we're going to go ahead and hit apply all. So I'm just noticing now in our game view, the droppable object's actually quite large compared to our player. So let's change our view in the scene view from perspective, and let's make that one isographic, or isometric rather. Click this so we're looking at it from the front, and you can see our player and our cube together. I'm just going to pull this one a bit closer to our player so we can actually see it sort of relative to our player, and I'm just going to decrease the size of that one until it looks about right. So that looks about correct. Let's make it 0.6. And then again, oops, copy, paste. And then again, we're going to want to override, apply all. Perfect. So the next thing we're going to want to do is start creating some prefab variants of this droppable. We're going to want to create 2 collectibles and 1 obstacle. So let's go ahead, create, should be prefab variant over here. So we want to right click, create prefab variant, and let's call this collectible, and then another prefab variant, obstacle. Perfect. So in our scene now, we can delete this droppable game object. And we want to create materials to distinguish between the collectible and the obstacle game objects. So let's go here and create some more materials. Materials folder, right click, create material, make this guy red. And again, these materials that we're going to be using to distinguish the game objects, they're only going to be temporary, because eventually we're going to be replacing these cubes with actual assets and graphics. So let's hit yellow. It just helps us visualize what the game's going to look like if we get these prototype graphics in with the cubes. So now in collectibles, we can go here. So I just went collectible, materials. If you hit this little circle, you can then select a material from anything in your project, and we're going to want to hit yellow. Yellow is a pretty good color for that. And in the obstacle, let's make that one red. So now if we drag some of these guys in the scene, you can sort of see them scattered around. Looks pretty good so far. One thing I forgot to do was set up our scores. So we want a collectible. Let's rename this guy to collectible 5 so we know how much. Actually, collectible 1, because we don't want to tie the value of the score to the variant itself. And then we can create a prefab variant of this guy and call that collectible 2. So let's keep that score at 5, and maybe let's make this one 15. And we can increase the size of this to 1 so it sort of stands out a bit more. Let's increase the size of the obstacle to 1.5 so it's actually an obstacle. And then we want to just tick is obstacle. Now we don't really need to worry about setting this score because on our start method we set that one to 0. Let's go ahead and start positioning some of these obstacles in our scene. So we want to make sure that they're on the same level as the player. So we should probably be setting these by default in code somewhere, all the Z positions. But let's take a look at a good Z position. 10. I think 10 is pretty good. So we'll just drag all of these guys in. Put some more of these. So I'm just putting some of these obstacles and collectibles into the game so we've got something to visualize for later. We're going to be randomly generating these around the game scene a bit later, but for now, this will have to do. So without all of that selected, let's make this 10. And you can see how all of them are now at exactly 10 on the Z coordinate. So they're sort of lined up. So if they were to fall down from the sky, they would all land on top of the player. And let's just sort of position these guys around the field a bit more. Obstacle. So, do they all have individual positions? They do. If you hold Control and click, you can select multiple game objects at once in your scene. So let's just set the Y of these all at the same level as well. Maybe we'll give them 15 so they're right at the top of that screen. Alright, perfect. I think this is a good demonstration of how we can use prefabs. I'll see you guys in the next video.